So today we are going to cover how the SmartStrength technology works. We're starting here with the torque arm, which basically is a function that's similar to a lever. So if we think of like just basic levers, everybody's probably picked something up with a weight that was close to their hand and it's fairly light. But the further that weight gets, the heavier it becomes and it's harder to hold that. So essentially what this does is it functions by allowing us to choose how far away the weight is from that pivot point, just like I was adjusting how far that weight was from my hand. And that is going to change throughout the range of motion. So we can change how challenging it is at different portions of the rep, which allows us to stimulate the muscle in different ways. So right now this is on a 3-pin. So if Adam does a curl and he just stops at the bottom there for me really quick, okay? Right now this is really far away from that pivot point, but as Adam starts to curl that, this is going to come back closer to that. So it started out here and then it started getting closer. So what happened is the amount of work that it took for Adam to lift the weight in the bottom decreased as it got closer to the top. Now if we switch that around and we were to move it to this bottom pin, now the pin is starting essentially underneath this pivot point, right? And so as Adam starts to curl, the weight is actually getting further. So now it's the exact opposite. Now if Adam goes back to the bottom, it's light here, and as he curls it up, it gets heavier and heavier. So those are two total opposite forms of resistance. One getting heavier towards the top, the other one getting lighter towards the top, and those are going to have different applications in training, so you can be very versatile with this machine. If we think of a regular like dumbbell curl, the dumbbell is farthest away from our elbow when we are in the middle, and it's closest when we're under, and it gets a little bit closer. So it would be actually most similar to the 1 setting on here. So if I take this and we put that on the 1 setting, which is our mid-range, now what we're gonna see is it's gonna go away and then it's actually gonna start coming back towards it just a little bit. So this one is gonna be the closest to kind of even throughout the entire range of motion. So what I wanna do is actually illustrate this with some numbers for you, right? So if you just hold that for me, Adam. Okay, so let's start here with this bottom position and we'll show you how much this changes. So I have just a tension scale here, right? That's just gonna measure how much tension it takes. And so as I go to pull this up, just like you were starting the exercise, and I hold that there, this is about 24 pounds that it's taking right here to move that weight from the bottom, right? Now this is the position, the 2 position that makes it hardest in the short, so it should be lighter there. So we have 45 pounds, but we're only having to lift 24 at the bottom. But if I take this 45 and I put it on the 3 setting, which is now the setting that should challenge that fully strength or fully lengthened position, it should be heavier here. And so now as I pull on this, okay, now it is almost exactly 45 pounds to move that 45 pounds. So in reality, it's almost, not quite, but almost half the weight to start on the 2 as here. And what we would see as it would go up to the top, those 2 things would flip, right? So this would be the lighter position at the top and that would be the lighter position at the bottom. So it's almost like double the amount of work at the bottom by putting it up here versus putting it down there. And that's why this gives you such a huge variety in the way that you can stimulate the muscles in training. When we look at the SmartCam, that's essentially taking the same functions as the torque arm, but putting it into kind of like this mechanical device. So this changes leverage by how far basically it's pushing out the cable that wraps around it. So instead of having weights that are different lengths away from the pivot point, it pushes that kind of pulley away from the pivot point. So we'll have this on the 2 setting here, and then we have 50 pounds on the stack. Right? Now this should be the setting here. This is the 2 setting, so this should be the setting that is light at the bottom and hard at the top. So if we actually look at this and I measure and we look at that in that short position, or I'm sorry, the lengthened position here, so that would be, it looks like we're about like 17 pounds. Now if we take that and we move it to the 3 setting, which should now be challenging in this lengthened bottom of the curl position, and I go to try and move that, okay, now we're at about 27 pounds. Okay, so about a 10-pound increase, or maybe like a 40% or 30%, don't check my math on the video, increase by just switching the cam. So it works just like the torque arm, okay? And then we have these in-between settings here. We're gonna have a 1, which is gonna be the same as the torque arms 1 right in the middle. And then we have a 4 and a 5, which are gonna kind of resemble us putting weights on 2 of the horns. So for instance, the 4 setting here, which is gonna be the one that would be between the 2 and the 1, is gonna be harder in the short position and lighter in the lengthen, but not as much as the furthest setting. So this is gonna be like the equivalent of putting a weight on the 2 setting of the torque arm and of the 1. So if we look at that, okay, this was 17 pounds last time with just the 2. Now it's up to about 22 pounds, right? So if we take that and we move it over to the 1, now we're in the mid-range, okay? All right, now we're getting closer to almost 25. We take it to that 5 range. Now we're getting to maybe 26-ish, right? And then we're here. And now we're in kind of like that 27, 28 range. So you have this continuum of how challenged you can make the load at every instance just by adjusting the lever on the cam, just like you can by placing the weights on the different torque arms. Just to show you guys how this affects throughout the entire range of motion, we're also going to show you how the weight is changed at the top. So if I have it on the 3 setting, which is the one that was harder at the bottom, right, and we bring that up towards the top. So it was, I believe at 50 pounds, it was about 28 pounds at the bottom. So now Adam's going to just curl that up for me so I don't have to lift it here, and just go ahead and let go, right? So now if we look at that, okay, we're only about like 11 or 12 pounds, right? So it's dropped off drastically towards the top position, which is exactly what the 3 setting should do. Now if I switch that, and we go to the 2 setting, there we go, and Adam hands that up to me again, okay? Now, go ahead and let that out, right? So now we have about 22 pounds, right? So almost double the weight by using the 2 setting, which is what the 2 setting is supposed to do. The 2 was supposed to be lighter at the bottom and heavier at the top, and the 3 is supposed to be heavier at the bottom and lighter at the top. So you can see the difference in those. Again, it's very similar to the torque arm in that we're almost getting just close to almost twice as much of a change between those 2 positions by using the different settings. So it's a drastically different training stimulus that really gives you a lot of options in your training. While these are the only machines that have this variable resistance technology, basically this is something that people have been striving to do in training since the beginning of weight training. They've just had to do it with different exercises. So I gave you the example of a dumbbell curl being heavy in the middle, right? So if we looked at exercises where we would try and challenge that more lengthened position, that would be an exercise standing with the pulley pulling behind you. And then we would also see exercises where things were more challenging at the top. That would be like the spider curl or reverse preacher curl. So people have been trying to accomplish this same change in resistance in training because of the benefits that it gives, especially for hypertrophy and performance. But here you can do it without having to use multiple exercises, and you can do it with very consistent loading.